So creating narratives and world building is hard, right? Only reserved for the mighty wordsmiths and authors that are out there, the professionals. Well, no, anyone can do it. Anyone. And in this video, I'm going to show how easy it is. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. So Peachy, world building and narrative. What is it and why is it important? Well, I think in any kind of story that has ever been written, having a setting is super key. And without the setting, it doesn't make sense. So if you pick any of your favorite fantasy or sci-fi films or shows, most of them have a setting. I mean, obviously modern day and real world stuff clearly does because it's the real world. But fantasy stuff also needs that. Otherwise it just becomes a bit pointless and has no grounding or basis in reality. So just to throw a few examples out, you've got Middle Earth, you've got Westeros, the lands of Skyrim and Elder Scrolls, so all of those places, there's quite a lot. Then you can go into like the sci-fi kind of stuff, so Star Wars, Star Trek. I mean, that's still kind of real world galaxy, I suppose, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's still got grounding. You know where you are with Deep Space Nine. And then things like 40K as well. Again, it's a similar galaxy to what we have, but you have places that you recognize and know. You know where Baal is. You know where the Eastern Fringe is. You know where the Tau Empire is. It's all that kind of stuff. It's very familiar and easy to know. And you can recall all that information. So if I'm playing Skyrim, I know exactly roughly where I am. If I look at these mountains here in this game, I know if I carry on traveling that way for a little bit and I hit probably Whiterun, you know where you are in the world, regardless of which fantasy made up world you're in. You know where you are. It makes sense. So when there's like been battles being talked about, you know where, oh, I know where Helm's Deep is. I know where Gondor is. I know where Osgiliath is in comparison to that. I know that obviously if they've just had this battle, they've got to travel this direction. It all makes sense. And that is what gives a narrative strength, is having a place, a location, somewhere that's familiar and you understand. Sometimes, however, it can be a bit too much, and I think Age of Sigmar suffers from that. It's a double-edged sword for me because it is vast. The realms, the mortal realms, have some great maps and they are super vast, but there's so much information there that actually they do fall into the realms of being a bit unforgettable, some of those areas. Not all, granted. So there's quite a few like, oh, I know where Hammerhall is, I know where Tempest Eye is, I know all these cool locations where these cities have come from, and where in Ulgu, where, I don't know, Hag Valkyrie, not Hag Valkyrie, that's my own made-up one, but that's definitely not in Ulgu. Hagnar is, though, Peachy. Hagnar definitely is. Regardless, Age of Sigmar can be vast, and there's lots to try and remember and work out where you are, but that is also the benefit of Age of Sigmar, because when there's the big campaigns going off, or there's the big story threads, and there's a lot of battles going off in a very particular place, and that's very sort of key to the story that Games Workshop's writing, you've got all these other locations on the peripherals, which is where you can put your campaigns, or you can build where your collections are from, because usually they're quite safe and they're not going to get destroyed or blown up. So in a way, Age of Sigmar is quite big. There's a lot of forgettable names in there, but also it's big enough that you can then make your own place and go, you know what, no one's going to remember this random name up in the far north, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to make my own realm out of that. So it's great for that. Like I said, double-edged sword, it's great, but also can be quite forgettable because there's so much. But that's not bad. I'd rather have too much than not enough. So Peach, what's the plan? What are you trying to tell us here? Well, simple. I'm going to be talking about making your own locations and how you go about doing it. I like drawing maps. I like putting places on maps, whether that's forests, mountains, cities, or whatever, and then build that into my stories. That grows as well. It probably changes, so I like update the maps or whatever. But that's one of the things I really enjoy doing. But a lot of people ask me, but how do you do that? That's you know, that's great, you know how to do that, but I don't know how to do that. I don't have the imagination to do that, or I don't know where to start. Well, luckily, there are two super useful resources available, and resources that I've only just discovered, because I do this stuff all the time. I enjoy doing this, but I found two really good game systems. They're great games in their own right. I'll probably cover those in a different video, but they've got some really good map making, or I guess realm building mechanics in them that will help you as players create your own places that you can then hook into other games as well. It doesn't have to be related just to these games. These have just got great mechanics in for making realms. And then you can then decide, well, actually, I'm going to use this for Baron's War. I'm going to use this for, I don't know, Warcrow or whatever. You can use it for whatever you want to. So first on my list is Oathmark. Now, Oathmark, I've not actually played a game of it. That's fine. I'm going to do a video on that later on where I talk about playing the game. As I've been looking through this book, this is a very Peachy thing to do, is I look through the book and I go, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. And I found a mechanic that was so amazing that most of my efforts have been focused on that as opposed to learning the rules yet to play the game. But from talking to many people, there are some things that I do know. So you can, if you really wanted to, use your orcs and goblins, elves, empire, or whatever, and basically just using the rules in this game, and you can find lists to help build that force. And if you really wanted to, you can like play elves versus orcs, or elves versus undead, or elves versus dwarves. It's like just using old world rules, but cooler or different, whatever. It's square base, it's big blocks of inventory, they all fight each other. Awesome. But the great thing about Oathmark is it's about realms as opposed to races. So the concept of this game system is you build a realm, and within that realm you have multiple different factions and cultures that all work together and then form your army. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. So there's a whole section in the book that is called Creating a Kingdom, and that is where you go about making, well, the area, the realm, or whatever you want to call it, where your army's from or your faction's from. The first thing you need to do is pick your capital, and that could be a human one, an orc one, an undead one, an elf one, whichever one you pick. It allows you to recruit certain units to play in the game. And then after that, because all the different like places or structures that allow you to recruit certain things, it's a bit like a real-time strategy. So it's like, oh, if you get this dwarf smithy, you can then build these units. If you get this elven wizard's tower, you can then build these things. So building a realm or kingdom in Oathmark is pretty straightforward. You have a sheet, it is your realm building sheet. You have a bunch of circles, and the concept is you build different buildings in these circles. Obviously, you just write them down on the list, but this dictates what kind of units you can recruit in your army. And I think it's all very exciting and very cool. You have to pick a capital city. That is the one that goes smack in the middle, in the very center of this realm, if you like. Every faction has different cities. So you have an elf city, an orc city, whatever. Only one of those can be your capital. You can have other cities in this map, but only one can be your capital. So let's say, for argument's sake, you want a human capital. Next to the human city, it's got the number 1 in the parenthesis. So that goes in the middle. So then the rarity increases. So when you get to the second circle, you can have 1s and 2s. When you get to the third circle, you can have 1s, 2s, and 3s. And then the rest of the circles after that, you can do the same thing. So in the center, it's less rare. It's a human city. And then you can get to like more weird things as you grow out to things like the high fells, the dark forests, because there's some unaligned stuff you can have as well. So if you wanted a dragon in your army, you need to get the high fells. But you have only a limited amount of space when you're doing your map. So you won't be able to have every possible unit in the game, which I actually quite like. It challenges you, certainly from this game, to be a bit picky about which kind of like locations you picked. So that decides which forces you can have in your game. But I found this to be a really fun mechanic for just building a realm in general. And I made like a brief one that I showed on Jugs called Ebonheart. But I was like, oh, I kind of want a faction that could turn to evil as well. So I've called it Ebon as the first name, but I might change it to Ebonfell if it turns to like the dark side, or if like a evil necromancer takes over. If I can't decide if I want it to be a goodie or a baddie kind of faction, I went with Ebon because I quite like the sound of that name. And I'll call it Ebonheart to start off with, because it's all good and they're all very nice, but then the king gets poisoned by some evil temptress and he's like evil, and then suddenly recruits those of undead, and now it's Ebonfell. Oh, don't go near Ebonfell because all your children, your firstborn, disappear. I'm making this up as I go along, by the way. There is no structure here. This is like names plucking from my head. You're like, Peachy, where'd you get it from? Don't know where I get it from. But now I'm going to move on to 5 Leagues on the Borderlands, which is this game. It also has a very fun realm building, kingdom building, whatever building mechanic in it. A very different game system to Oathmark. Oathmark is big battles. It's by Osprey and Joe, whereas this is by Modiphius. Now, this particular game is solo play and co-op. And it kind of feels like it's a mishmash between a D&D system and a skirmish game, and I love it. Again, I'm going to do a whole video on this at some point. I might do this one and the sci-fi version all as one video, because that makes sense, because they kind of cross-pollinate quite well. Now, the mechanics for making your realm in this game is very different to the Oathmark one, where you pick on centric circles and then decide the rarity, and then you basically can choose what that looks like. It's entirely up to you, because you want to, I guess, tech tree the things you want to use in the game for Oathmark, whereas this, it's done on a D100, and you randomly roll to see like the size of your settlement. You then see what's in that settlement. So in this, you could have like a hamlet, a town, and 2 villages or whatever. It varies depending on what number you roll on the D100. And then within that, you decide what kind of settlement type it is. So it could be, is it a military outpost? Is it like some kind of manor or whatever? That's kind of like the early stages of like what your little location is going to be. It's not like a vast, like sort of like, oh, this is an entire country. This is like an area within a country, if you like. And then you fill in the gaps around it. So after that, once you've worked out what kind of settlement it is, how many there are, so how many villages, etc., you then need to do some gap filling. So like a few rivers, it's like 4 to 5 like of these, like some hills, some rivers, forests, etc. And then there's like hidden locations and explored locations. So you place those on the map because this is kind of like the area you're going on. Your warband, your group of dudes, adventurers are going to go to these places and do different adventures and stuff. But that then opens up to give them names as well. So, you know, unexplored locations, a bit like when you're in Skyrim and you're walking around and you see like on your map, there's like, oh, there's a door or a cave. Oh, that's an unexplored location in this game. So at some point, the story will drive you there. And that's all done through the game mechanic here. You get given jobs and tasks and the story takes you to these places. But one of the things I really liked about it is you have to pick like some threats that go in the game. So you have a couple of threats within and a threat without. And then you roll on the table to see what you don't have to roll, you can pick. So you could, for instance, say, you know what, there's a load of brigands hanging around and there's some undead nuisance. There's a necromancer causing some issues and raising the undead. But the enemy without situation is there's a huge army. There's a big battle going to be going off. Our nation is at war with another nation, and then that's just the thing that's going off. So potentially there's lots of troops mustering. There's the odd skirmish on the border. Depending on which one you pick, that influences the enemy within and the enemy without story threads. One of those has to be like a really big problem, and the other two tend to be minor problems. So the big problem could be the big war, the invasion, or it could be the necromancer raising. That's the big problem that you need to solve because that's going to cause extra problems. The minor problem is maybe the invading country isn't that big. They're just rattling the saber against your country or whatever. You decide how that works. So you just pick the priority of threat level, if that makes sense. And what I thought was actually these two books I can merge together into the same map. So I could use Oathmark to build the general map itself. I can then use this to work out what is the town, what are the settlements, what are those bits in between. So because I've already made that map, I can then use this to help add to that, and then I can work out what my enemy within is, what my enemy without is, what the general gist of the storyline is. So using these two game systems to make a cool, fun narrative map actually can work quite well. So that is what I'm going to do. And I start off first of all building the skeletal work by using Oathmark, and then I'm going to add detail to that skeletal work with this. So I know that this town is important. This is the capital. This is the main place I want to be because I obviously have capital cities in there. That will be the main focus because it could be a military outpost or whatever. Or I could take a section of my map and then turn it into this. Let's see what happens. I'm going to have fun making some maps first of all. It's going to be Oathmark. That's going to be the general gist of building the map. And then I'm going to move into 5 Leagues from the Borderlands to add a bit more flavour to it. So let's go do that. So with all the locations now placed onto my post-it note, which was my rough little realm sheet. I mean, obviously you can print out the realm sheet. I just used a post-it note because I have a habit of changing my mind and felt like a waste of paper. So I now know where that all is, roughly, what locations I want. So now it's a matter of putting those onto a map. So I'm going to begin first by just sketching out rough little circles of where I want the things to be. So like, you know, probably put the capital maybe in the center of the map or close to. And then it's just a matter of thinking about where the other locations will be in comparison to that. So as you can see, this is very rough. This is like when you do with any kind of sketching, you tend to have like a rough skeletal work beforehand, then you can rub it out and then fill it in, or it's just a plan. You can be a separate piece of paper. I don't feel the need to do a separate piece of paper because I can just rub out and just add to this as time goes on. So yeah, it's just placing those out roughly where I'd like them because I can always move it around as well. That's the other thing. I'm like, oh, I don't quite like that being there. I'll rub that out and put that elsewhere. Now that I roughly know where everything's going to be on the actual map, it is now a matter of just me well, making my map. So I'm going to rub out some of those circles and start filling in with some little pretty pictures of what a dwarf hold might look like, or a mine, or whatever. So I'll just start with the first 3 locations, which is the dwarf city, the capital city, the smithy, and then the sort of iron mine for the humans. I'll do the actual human castle village later on. From an artistic point of view, you don't need art skills. You can just do like rough little houses, rough little castles, just like a symbol, like a tower or something like that. It doesn't have to be mad. So yeah, I'm just going to make a rough sketch initially, because later on I will be filling these in with a pen later on, and that can be a little bit more detailed if I wanted to. I don't know if it's a Bob Ross thing, but I do like drawing mountains. I'm a big fan of mountains and woods. I used to do this a lot when I was a kid as well. That's probably where my love for mountains and forests came from, is Bob Ross videos and just drawing lots of little maps, pirate maps with my mates, making up random locations. Tolkien's got a lot to answer for. It really has. Something I wanted to do as well when I was doing the elf mine, the silver mine, is that's why I've added an aqueduct. So if you take Tolkien elves, for instance, they tend to be more sympathetic to the natural environment around them, so they tend to make things a little bit more, well, natural looking and aesthetically pleasing. I can't do that, but I'll do something close to it. My woods, so I've got a dark forest, so I'm just going to do like a rough sort of like spiky sort of conifer, evergreen kind of forest for that. So lots of like spiky bits. So I might just do the little pine tree, and then just the rest will just be jags. Whereas my other forest, which isn't a dark forest, I'll probably do that a little bit more like a normal deciduous forest. Normal trees, normal wooded sort of trees that you expect to see in woods. My elf city is heavily inspired by Warhammer related elf cities. Lots of spires, sleek, long spires, like the towers of Hoth, or Hoeth, however people want to pronounce it. I always forget the actual official pronunciation. Drop that in the comments if you remember, because I can't. I've said both over the years. Maybe I'm getting confused by Star Wars, that's why I want to say Hoth, and it maybe is Hoeth. But yeah, nice. It's got Gondolin vibes, but you know, it's an elf city. They have tall walls and big spires. And then it's onto the wood. Again, all these places, I've just put the location down, which is like forest or dark forest, because I'll come up with the names later on. I often do that. I want to get things on the paper first, plan it out, make little routes, maybe rivers, maybe roads, and then yeah, fill out the name later. So there's a bit of a void where that will be. I could obviously later on do this properly via Photoshop and stuff, but right now I'm just having fun sketching, doing hills and forests and mountains and living my best life. Doing my little goblin town, city, capital. I wanted to go for a classic sort of, I guess, Saxon Viking kind of vibe. So it's got like the Motte and Bailey kind of feel. Also something I wanted to do with that was kind of tie into the barrens that are around it as well, like the rough sort of rocky areas. I might turn them into mushrooms later on, but I wanted the houses to look like boulders, which kind of matched with the terrain around it a bit. Then there's the human city, classic castle. Just going to do a castle. I like castles, I think they look great. Maybe humans, maybe it's just like the European in me, but I think human cities, medieval ones, should look like castles. Don't know why. That's just humans, right? That's what we've always done. We've always made castles of some form. It feels right. The rough hills, now they are hills, but I wanted to make them feel a bit more spooky. So they've got like monoliths like Stonehenge in there and stuff. That was my thought. So I thought I'd just get some of those in there as well. I'm not sure where that will lead. I'm not sure if I like it or not, but it's in there for the moment. Adding some peaks into the dark forest. And then the high fells. I'm not really sure what a fell is. I'm using my Lord of the Rings reference here, so it looks like lots of like tall cliff faces on mountains. So that's what I went with, because this is where the dragons are going to live. Lots of little caves and stuff. The odd peak. It's probably going to be quite desolate as well. It's far north in comparison to the rest of the realm. But these are the dragons they can recruit. So maybe some are baddies, maybe some are goodies. I don't know. And now another location I had. Now this ancient catacombs came from one of the other books of Oathmark, and basically focused on the undead. And I was like, oh, I want some undead in my army. I quite like the idea of recruiting some undead. Maybe like with using the Lord of the Rings analogy, you've got sort of like the army of the dead that gets controlled by Aragorn. So maybe there are ancient heroes scattered around in those barrows on that hill with all the monoliths. But this one, I felt like it should be an old city that's been smashed and destroyed by Mordheim vibes going in there. But yeah, been destroyed long ago. So it's full of like spirits and stuff. But maybe that's where the baddies will live as well. I don't know. But yeah, just some ruined old city. I like ruined old cities. I know it says catacombs, but I imagine there's lots of like catacombs underneath. And actually, I guess this is where my Frostgrave sort of hints will come in. If I want to play games of Frostgrave, it would be around this location. So yes. Now I'm just going to move on to basically just going around and refining things with some pen. I have these nice little art pens, fine liner pens. Always used to use these all the time. With my pencil, it's quite rough. It's giving me a guide now, and I can be a little bit more detailed, but not super detailed. I'm not going mad. And again, this is just something I like doing. This is not something you have to do. You can just do it with a biro. It could all be top down. It could be squares instead of like little crenellations and stuff. You know, just a top down square. That's this city. Some little spiky bits that look like mountains. Some little squiggly bits that look like woods or whatever. So when I was doing the dwarf smithy, I kind of went down. I was being a bit dumb, and I kind of turned it into a mine, but then it needs a mine around it, and then I just drew this little anvil, like a big black anvil. So it kind of looks like a mine. I did even do like a sort of a track, like a minecart track, so I could count it as a mine if I wanted to. But I used the dwarf smithy from the dwarf building list, so it kind of looks like both. But yeah, dwarfs like mining, and it's a smithy. They combine the two together. That's my argument. The problem is, at this point as well, if you are doing it with pen, you might make mistakes, and you can either start from the beginning, or you can turn those mistakes into happy little accidents, as Bob Ross would say. So there's a couple of times where I like did some smoky bits, or like some mountains got a bit rough, but actually no one's going to notice that. Only you notice it because you made the mistake. So don't stress it too much. That will happen. But it's all just a bit of fun, and you can always add to it or change it. I mean, I could do, like I said, a proper one on Photoshop or something down the line, but I'm old school. I like my pencils and pens, always have, and brushes and paints. Yeah, that's where I am. So yeah, just sketchy, filling it all out. Yeah, doing the forest is fun, especially the pine forests. Lots of little jaggedy bits. Can get a bit repetitive, but it's all good fun. So there we are. I got most of it all sketched out. I didn't get a shot of the final piece because I was getting a bit ahead of myself. I'll show the coloured version later on. So what I'm now going to do is start rolling to find out what like the different themes of my cities. So my dwarf city ended up being like a trading hub, which kind of made sense because that kind of has the theme of Erebor. So then after that was to decide what my human city would be like, or what the theme is for that. Again, you can change this if you don't like the result. You can just go, you know, it's my city, it's my realm, I'll do what I want. My human city, although it says market town, it's a market related city, so a lot of trade there, maybe trade with the dwarfs, lots of different wares from across the locations on the map, far and wide. The elf one ended up being a military outpost, which actually I didn't mind. I was like, maybe the human one should be a military outpost, but I was like, no, actually no, I quite like the elf one being a military outpost. They've been there longer, they're having to deal with like threats from like maybe the humans and the dwarfs as well, and other realms around them. And then when I rolled for the goblin village, I got a nomadic camp. So I was like, well, that can't really make sense because it looks like it's something that could easily be broken down and then rebuilt. So I was quite pleased with that. And then for my threats, so the threats within, I got some brigands and bandits, which kind of is quite cool. It's called the enemy within, which kind of makes sense. I might place those into the ruined city area, and around about they'll be in forests and stuff. Have like bandit hideouts in forests and whatever. And the other one I got was something called the Ice Heart Court, which is where the tree folk and the fey folk are basically rebelling. And that kind of fitted with the locations I got because I've got lots of mines around. I've got a bit of industry, so the dwarfs are doing stuff. So that kind of made sense as well. So I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to keep that role because these are all honest roles and try and find a way of tying that into the background. So yes, I got tree folk being quite angry. Which is great. I kind of like the nature versus the industry thing. And then for my foe without, or my enemy without, I ended up rolling the Faceless Kingdom, which kind of worked quite well. So that is where a faction is at war with your nation. And it's at this point I decided I've made this other map that I showed on Jugs, which was a random thing I called originally Ebonheart. Then I've now decided I'm going to keep to Ebonfell. And that's going to be the faction they're going to fight against. So I now have two realms, one that I just did for fun ages ago, and this one I'm doing for the video, but that kind of like links together. So Ebonfell versus whatever this kingdom will be called. So yes, all good fun. So I was pleased with those results. So the next bit really is to get that map finalised and then come up with some names for those locations. The actual name of the realm I might say for you guys. Right, well, I've drawn the map. I got a bit carried away and started colouring it in. The main reason I did some colouring in was so I could easily identify the difference between like the cities, some of the other random things on the outskirts, like the woods, the greenery areas, like the grasslands, the high fells. It was for me, but hopefully, otherwise it would just look like a shapeless mass of black and white. An idiot, I didn't take a photo of it just as the black and white sketched map. It's the footage that you've just seen and now this. So apologies for that because I got carried away. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the areas, talk through what my thoughts are, how they link together, how using the 5 leagues from the Borderlands and the Oathmark stuff can work together as well. I'm probably going to use all this as well for every fantasy-based battle report I do down the line. So whether that's like Rangers of Shadowdeep or Frostgrave. I know technically it's Frostgrave, but I'm going to use this as my setting. Maybe it's somewhere in the same area. Don't know. But it's going to be the thing that I use because I quite like it. I've become a fan of it in the short space of time of making it. So let's have a little look at some of the locations and what my thoughts were when I was doing it. So my capital city was going to be something dwarf related. So dwarfs like gold. So it made sense to have something gold related in the name. These names are all just like plucked out of the air, sounds kind of right, and that's where I've gone with. So I've got Gold Peak Bastion. So that's where my dwarfs are going to reside. So doing the rolls from the 5 leagues of the Borderlands, I'm just going to say 5 leagues from now on because it's shorthand. I can't be bothered to keep saying the full title. I rolled Trading Hub for that. So that kind of makes sense. It's like the centre. It's a bit like Erebor in The Hobbit. So it's like a hub of trading where all the minerals and wealth from the mountains come, but also all the areas around them as well, because they've got links to the elves and the humans and even the goblins of Rascal Town, which we'll come to later, because I had to add that in. It'd be rude not to. So yes, we've got Gold Beat Bastion, and then further south of that is Gold Bloom Smithy. I love a bit of gold blooming. Who doesn't like a little bit of gold blooming in their life? So that's the name of the smithy. It kind of looks a bit like a mine. I kind of started probably drawing a mine when I was doing the smithy, but that's fine. So I did like a bit of a purpley border around those because I want them to look different from the other realms around it. Blue was kind of like the theme initially for, I'll just do blue around all the pictures. That's all the cities, but then it became a bit of a shapeless mass because they're all quite close together. I wanted to keep a theme of grey for my humans because what I want to do is link in my Frostgrave warbands. So I've got the Grey Conclave, which is like an order of wizards or monks and stuff like that. So I'm going to link them into this. So because they've got the mine and they've got the city, even though it's like not a capital city, it's still a city. It's officially a market town was the role I did on 5 leagues. So it's a market city, market fortress, what you want to call it. Market fortress. Is that even a thing? Probably not. But it's called Greystone because they mine grey stone. I've got the Grey Conclave, which is the name of the grey order of wizards that I've done for Frostgrave. So that kind of ties in. So everything's grey related. They're a bit dull. They're a bit northern, maybe. And then the mine is called Grey Crag Quarry. Say that 5 times fast. Grey Crag. No. I failed on the second time. So Grey Crag Quarry. Oh my God, why did I name it that? That's a terrible idea. Oh, even better. I love it. So they link together. They're grey related. I've got the Grey Conclave in there. I have thoughts about the Grey Conclave because normally when you are doing these kind of things with Oathmark, you can have undead in your realm and working with you, and I'm like, how do I tie that in without them being necromancers? And I thought, because they're grey wizards, they're not like black or white, you know, it's not either light or dark, it's somewhere in the middle, so they use what they need to do the job at hand, hence the grey element. So I was like, yeah, and shadowy as well. So they aren't evil, but also they do what's necessary. That's the thought. That's the thought. Then I got my elves. I thought it was probably an ancient citadel from millennia ago, and they mined silver from obviously the mountains. Everything's made out of silver. Their armor's made out of like hardened battle silver. I want to say mithril, but I don't know if that will be like copyrightable or not. So yes, silver spires, because there's lots of spires. Because I like my elf towers. I was very influenced by Citadel when I was doing these elven towers, as you can probably imagine. And then I was like, mines. I mean, they're not really. I mean, they obviously must mine for materials and stuff to make armor. What does a mine look like? It must be very like ornate looking. So that's why I've got an aqueduct there, and it like part of the aqueduct in the tower becomes a waterfall and stuff. And it obviously there's going to be a mill wheel, but maybe it's a really intricate mill wheel. I don't know. But yeah, Silver Mist Mine and Silver Spires. That's the elf related stuff. Now, the thing with the elf stuff as well is like, I've got my mine, but my citadel or my city is a military outpost. That kind of makes sense. Maybe they've been there for a long time, keeping tabs on some of the younger races, but it's probably they're more warlike or ready for war than maybe the humans are and the dwarfs are. I like to think the dwarfs are probably more ready for war than the elves. It's just, that's what dwarfs are like. It's not because I'm being biased, because dwarfs are the best. Now, there are other elements from Oathmark which were depending on like humans. If you went for, I don't know, like one of the forests or the barrens and stuff. I don't want to like, I've coloured them in different because I want that to be a fairly generic, because the Great Plains or the Southwind Savannah is an elf-related territory, but I want it to be a generic territory, if that makes sense. Even though that's where you recruit your elf cavalry from and stuff. It just felt right that it's like, it's a forest, it's a savannah, it's some barrens, it's some crags, it's another forest. It just makes sense that it's all related to all races then, as opposed to just being specific to the elves like it is in Oathmark. And then I have Rascal Town, which when I rolled on that on 5 leagues, that was a nomadic encampment. So I was like, that kind of makes sense. They move around the plains and the prairies and the grasslands, etc., and just hunt as they need to, and just set up their little Rascal Town little encampment with their Mott and Bailey style huts, mud huts, maybe fungal huts, maybe. I started adding some like mushrooms later on because I was doing the shield design and I was trying to mimic Louise's Rascal Town imagery. So that's the cities kind of covered. Cities, human related, mines, etc. So I've got lots of little bits and bobs around. So I've got the Black Pine Forest, so that's gonna be kind of like a darker, maybe more spooky forest, a bit like Fangor maybe, or Mirkwood. One of the threats I rolled was the Ice Heart Court, which is all related to tree folk and fey folk, and I reckon they'll be across both woods, like the Dark Forest and like the Green Vale, but mostly that's kind of they've got a bit angry about all the industry that's been going off, like because you've got like mines. It's like 3 mines. I mean, there's a silver mine, there's the crag at the top, and then I know it's a smithy, but I kind of count it as a mine as well, because the trees keep getting cut down and they don't like it, and rightly so. So yes, that's one of the internal threats, or the threats within, which is the tree folk. And then I've got the Green Vale. Again, I can have some fey folk in there. Then I'll move over to the Barrens. I mean, that's more like moors and stuff like that, but it's kind of like just rolling hills with not much like vegetation on it. Kind of a nice sort of like, I guess, from the forest to like some greenery with some rocks, but not many trees, then to open plains and grasslands, which is where the Rascal Town guys tend to do a lot of their hunting and hanging out. We've got the Southwind Savannah. I just thought south, it's near the south of like the human-y stuff and the dwarf stuff, southish, and it's a savannah. The two kind of names sound kind of right together, and the wind blows from the south, so you know it's kind of warm, it's nice, it's temperate. That's where the name came. Most of these names are just made up. I mean, if you can think of better names, do throw them in. I like hearing ideas. Now, near Greystone, I've got an area. I've coloured this in orange because it's not like evil or good or anything like that. I just thought I'll go with orange because it stands out as like, maybe there's I can have some bad stuff going off there or whatever. So I called it the Monolith Moors. It was the actual rough hills I rolled for when I picked. And I decided I was going to go down a bit of a sort of Neolithic cultural kind of vibe. So some old ancient civilization was there. Lots of burial grounds. Maybe some of the old kings of Greystone or Gold Peak Bastion bury their things. I think the dwarves will bury their stuff underground in the mountains as opposed to in some random hills. But I like the idea of it being some old abandoned ancient civilization or culture. And it's got lots of sort of monoliths on it and stuff, so that kind of made sense to me. And it's near the High Fells, which I've called Fire Drake Plateau, because when you have the High Fells you can recruit dragons, and I was like, oh, I like the idea of dragons. I needed a very dragony name, and I was like coming for like ideas for names for High Fells. Plateau made sense because it's quite flat on the top as well. So Fire Drake Plateau makes it sound like some kind of cake. Fire Drake Gatto. No, don't like that. But yeah, lots of caves, some winding stairs up there. It's near the Black Pine Forest. It's kind of like a bit spooky and a bit, not evil, but dark, and probably not somewhere you want to wander at night, maybe. And that's where they recruit the dragons from. I like to think there's a trial that you have to go through to try and recruit a dragon. It's not just like you knock on the door and they're like, yeah, I'll come and join the fight, mate. No worries. Maybe they have to go through some kind of processes, sacrifices maybe. Maybe the Grey Conclave have to sacrifice I don't know, 14 chickens and one golden-haired child. I don't know. Why golden-haired? I don't know. But goddamn Goldilocks. The bears get sick and tired of her. They're just like, get rid of her, stealing all our porridge. And then I'm going to move over to, so I've done the Barons. We've got the Shadowgrave Ruins. Now, I did get another book for Oathmark, which had the undead stuff in it, and there's like a whole bunch of things in there. And I went with what is Ancient Catacombs, it was called. So I like the idea of there being an old ruined city, maybe. Might have been an old human city. I like to think it was an old human city. I'm going with my Moldine vibes here, which kind of link with Frostgrave as well. This is where a lot of the Frostgrave games will happen. Maybe some of the Rangers of Shadowdeep games will happen, as well as the Black Pine Forests. It's also quite close to the borders of the other random place I made up when I was on Jugs. I talked about like one I made up. This was my first attempt at doing this kind of like realm building mechanic in Oathmark. And that's called Ebenfell. I'll come to that in a moment. But yeah, the Shadowgrave Ruins, probably, you know, it's an old city or civilization. Maybe they call themselves Shadowgrave because it was always in the shadow of like the mountains and stuff because of the way the sun was. But now it's called Shadowgrave because a big meteorite hit it. Not at all stolen from Mordheim. And now it's full of brigands, which is one of the other enemies within. So a bunch of brigands in there, and that's where I'll maybe focus my necromancers from my Frostgrave game as well. So the Crimson Dawn, maybe they're raising their own undead. They're probably linked to Ebenfell, maybe they're agents of Ebenfell, and they're like trying to build up a force on the borders of this unnamed realm, which I'll also come to in a bit. I think the Grey Conclave will go there in times of war to raise the dead. Maybe they go to the Monolith Moors as well and raise the dead from there. So even though I've specifically the Ancient Catacombs is where you recruit your undead in Oathmark, I like to think they're all scattered across the realms in like different sorts of burial grounds of different types. And that's the Grey Conclave's job. I like the idea of them being a bit on, you know, either way, and they can raise the dead. And they have to go to these places and perform rites of passage and stuff like that before summoning ancient heroes who then control the forces. I don't know. That's still up in the air. But I like the idea that the Grey Conclave do that. But yeah, that's the Shadowgrave Ruins. I think that's all of them covered. So I don't have a name for my realm yet. And I think I'm just going to chuck that out there to you guys to come up with. I think it'll be quite good fun. So drop some suggestions in the comments. I mean, the capital city is Gold Peak Bastion. There's a lot of gold related there. Then I've got silver and grey. It kind of feels like it should link to that somehow. But then my other one I made up was called Ebenfell. I just like the word Eben and fell. Originally it was called Ebonheart, but I like to think that was when it was a good kingdom. And then the king got poisoned by some evil hag witch. Not at all taken from Maleficent. Absolutely not taken from that at all. And then he's become a bit of a bitter, evil kind of king, and now he wants to have war, which is the enemy without section of this. So I rolled for 3 threats. One was, and this is using the 5 league stuff, one threat was the tree folk being quite angry about all the industry that's happening around and all their trees being cut down. Kind of makes sense. Then I got the brigands that are hanging around in the Shadowgrave Ruins. Maybe some of those agents from Ebenfell, maybe they're just like disenchanted deserters. And then, of course, I have the enemy without, which is the Faceless Kingdom, it's called, which is some warring faction, and that is going to be my main threat. So that's number 6. I don't know why you have 5 and 6. I don't know why it's not like 1 and 2. I need to swat up a bit more on 5 leagues, but you pick 2 to have like a threat rating of 5, and you pick 1 to have a threat rating of 6. So my warring faction is going to be the bigger threat here, which is quite cool. And it's just amazing, really, when you just start like drawing some like little circles and write some names down, and like you're picking from a list of different territories that you can have, and then you're like I did on this sketchbook, drew some rough circles of where I want all the places to be on the map, and then you start working into it. Obviously, I'm not expecting anyone to, I mean, this isn't like the best map in the world, but it works for me and I'm happy with it. And some people might want to do that. Some people might just want to do circles. Some people might want to go even more, like Louise, because she likes making maps. She's very good at making maps. So I imagine if she did some map action, it would look 10 times better than this. But I had fun doing it, and that's the great thing. And also, it's now given me lots of food for thought. So my Rangers of Shadowdeep games will be featured around this. My Borderlands games, my 5 leagues from the Borderlands will be featured around this. My Frostgrave games will be featured around this as well. So yeah, it's kind of worked quite well and I know they're all different games with their own different sort of I guess, backgrounds and stuff. But I can find a way of linking them in, because this could be a section somewhere in the Rangers of Shadowdeep lore, because it's a made up realm and it mentions a few key names, but this could be like somewhere to the north or to the east or to the west or whatever. And it's the same for Frostgrave, you know. I've got Shadowgrave. Oh, I never even thought about it. I had a grave at the end. Didn't even think about that. It's just Shadowgrave instead of Frostgrave. That kind of makes sense. Oh man, I've mixed Mordheim with Frostgrave. Is that a big no-no? Who knows? But yes, I did some heraldry as well for each of the cities. I felt like they deserved some heraldry. Standard sort of like feudal heraldry for the humans. Classic sort of dwarf hammers and anvils, and then I kind of went down the Roman route with the elves. I kind of like the idea of making them feel more Roman-esque when I get around to painting those, especially if I do like a full Oathmark force, because I've got some really nice plastics as well, the Oathmark stuff has, so I want to look at building upon them. I will base all my things on round bases, and then I'll just add them, because in Oathmark, when you do the games, it's technically a square-based unit formation kind of game, like Warhammer of old. But I'll put them on rounds and then just make movement trades for them, because then I can use them in all my skirmish games. And I don't know why I went so high-pitched them. Now, this whole process was quite natural. There was no sort of like, none of this was written down before. None of this was like, this is the plan, and I pretend that I made up. I just literally made up on the spot. I had a lot of fun doing this, and that you can also just do the exact same thing and just roll on a table, or pick out some random places from Oathmark, roll on some tables in 5 leagues of Borderlands, and then weirdly it kind of makes its own narrative. When I originally rolled for the Tree Folk thing, the Ice Heart Core, I was like, how am I going to fit that in? And then it just made sense, like, oh, I've got a forest near loads of mines. That kind of makes sense. It's kind of written itself, really. And I think a lot of these things do that. And I still find it quite odd having like things that don't feel fitting with factions being able to be recruited in the army. So dragons and undead and goblins, and like in some of the forests you can have wolves and werewolves and stuff like that. That still feels kind of weird to have in your nation when they go to war. They gather these forces, but I'm kind of excited to actually get around to making a force of that. Disclaimer, that's not going to happen anytime soon. That's going to be a slow process, because I've got lots of other things I want to do. But I do love the idea of this. But yes, I need a name. I need a name. Something with grey or gold or silver. Grey, gold, silver kingdom. That's not that. It's not going to be that. But hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you got a lot out of it. A lot of people ask me about how I go about like world building and creating narratives. A lot of it is just natural. It kind of solves itself. Influences, obviously, I've got a lot of influences here from Mordheim, Frostgrave, Rangers of Shadowdeep. I've got those in the back of my mind when I've been filling this out. Stuff like Middle-earth, Westeros, like having like 2 factions warring against each other. Obviously chucking in Maleficent in there, because that king in there gets like his mind poisoned by the evil witch that's taken over. So it all kind of makes sense, really. I mean, you just can be easily inspired by TV shows and just reskin it. I mean, that it can be as complicated as that, or you can go more into it and have like loads of economic decisions and geographical locations that don't work well with each other, and you've got like political things that are going off. You can have this whole tech tree of like why this faction doesn't get on with this faction, why trade is no longer allowed here, and this, that, and the other. You know, it's got its own form of Brexit or whatever. So you can go as far as that, or you can just reskin something from shows that you like. And that's the beauty, really, of making up your own worlds or maps. It's just a bit of fun. Whether that is just scattering rice onto a piece of paper and drawing around it and then sticking the odd little town here and there, or you use something like this, or you go full on and just start from scratch and make your own thing up. There's no right or wrong way, really. It's whatever works for you. So the only thing I think would really matter is making sure the narrative makes sense. So having some factions that are strong allies, but they're being like a million miles apart from each other, doesn't make a lot of sense. Whereas you'd probably want the allies quite close to each other, or within some kind of like traveling distance that isn't too far. But then, you know, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. Well, as always, thank you to these beautiful people going by and all of my supporters far and wide, whether you are from some random made-up realm, Rascal Town, or anywhere in the world. I love you all. You are my favourite people because you support me and you're really, really kind, and I love it. Obviously, I've got plans to do more stuff related to this, so Frostgrave related games, Rangers of Shadowdeep games. Any ideas of things you want to see, do chuck them into the comments as well, or games that I've you know about, and you think, oh, Peach will like this. There's a lot I've become made aware of, like Death Wizards and Necropolis, and many more. Doomed, which I still need to try. So many games, so many. Malifaux, still need to like look into that, and then that Carnival. Oh my god, the list goes on. I don't think there's enough time in the world. I need to somehow find time to stop time and then speed up my work process so I can do like 1 million videos a week. That would be good. No one will watch them though. No, that's probably true, because I do so much content. No one will watch any of them. That's a terrible idea. Yeah, don't do that. Just do 1 a week at the moment. That's better. That's better. Yeah, keep to that, Peach. Anyway, love you all. Goodbye. I've ran off enough. I've got nothing else to add other than my greatest love for each and every one of you.